Hey everybody, it's Roger, creator of the Azure Sandbox. I'm back, and this is the last video in the series covering the Azure MySQL Flexible Server configuration in the Azure Sandbox. So we're going to pick up here in the documentation section and do a quick walkthrough of some of the code involved in this configuration. So the first thing I write up in the documentation is the bootstrap script. So we've seen quite a few of those, but let's have a look and see what this bootstrap script looks like. I'll go ahead and close down my terminal because I'm not using that anymore. So this should be pretty familiar for you. The first thing we do is we go out and get the configuration information from VNet shared from the state file there. And we populate some environment variables using this Terraform output command. So, these are all the dependencies on VNet shared that we're initializing here. And then we also have dependencies on VNet app. And specifically, we've got the private DNS zones variable that we need to populate using that state file. And also the subnets definitions are part of that state file as well in VNet app. So we have all of that previously provisioned configuration information loaded up. Now we can go get our user input, which is basically just the name of the database that we want to provision in the MySQL Flexible Server instance. We go and check to see if our service principal secret environment variable has been configured. And then we go get some secrets from Key Vault. And we write out our terraform.tf-vars file. So these are the specific variables defined in variables.tf over here that we don't have a default value for, that we want to get either from one of our previous configurations or from some user input. So that's a pretty straightforward piece of code there, similar to many of the other bootstraps that you've seen in the Azure Sandbox. So let's go have a look at the resources. Those are all sitting in this mysql.tf file. Just a couple, so pretty straightforward, pretty easy. So we've got one resource for our MySQL Flexible Server, one resource for our database. We generate the name for our MySQL Flexible Server, which does need to be globally unique because it has a fully qualified domain name sitting behind it. So I use Terraform's random ID provider to generate that. And then we drop it into our resource group that's been provisioned previously in the Azure region that we did previously. And then we put it in a particular availability zone, configure the administrative login and password. So let's go see which zone I dropped it in. Flexible server zone, MySQL Flexible Server zone. Just stick it in zone 1. Okay. Now here's where we tell it to use this particular delegated subnet for private endpoints. And here's where we link it to our private DNS zone that was previously provisioned in, I believe we did that in VNet app. It may be VNet shared, but it's that mysql.database.azure.com private DNS zone that we were talking about. And we choose a SKU, which choose a very low end SKU here. because we're just using this for testing purposes. Now, when you specify this private DNS zone and this delegated subnet, the Azure MySQL Flexible Server service will automatically provision an A record in your private DNS zone for this particular instance. And we saw that previously in the smoke testing. And then here's where we provision our database. So we just give it a name and we link it to the previous server that we provisioned above, define the character set and collation, and we're off and running. So pretty simple set of configuration associated with this. Okay, great. So that's it for the Azure MySQL Database Flexible Server Configuration video series in the Azure Sandbox. We'll see you in the next video series. Thanks, everybody.